All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to those in the room and those online. Quick reminder to folks online to please mute your microphone. That way we won't have any interruptions during the presentation. I just have a quick intro to the Africa Biodiversity Collaborative Group, and then I will hand it over to our featured speaker today. My name is Rebecca Goodman. I am the director of ABCG. We are a community of conservation and development practitioners working around the world in sub-Saharan Africa who are sharing experiences and translating our knowledge into practical tools in order to address high priority conservation issues on the continent, and then to share those best practices with the wider conservation and development communities for integration and policy information. So currently our members are the African Wildlife Foundation, Conservation International, the Jane Goodall Institute, the Nature Conservancy, the Wildlife Conservation Society, the World Resources Institute, and the World Wildlife Fund. Our purpose and mission is to increase our collective conservation impact as a collaborative and to advance understanding of critical biodiversity challenges and their solutions in sub-Saharan Africa. And we do that through an integrated approach where we're working with our partners on the ground to identify knowledge gaps, and then, like I said, sharing experiences amongst ourselves and with those partners to fill the gaps by developing new tools and approaches. Reminder, if everyone could please mute their microphone. Thank you. Synthesizing and disseminating that knowledge, and then actually using pilot studies to test the knowledge, receive the lessons learned back, and then that feeds back into the cycle where we're then identifying what further gaps exist with our partners and keep going round and round. Currently, we're organized under two broad thematic areas. The conservation planning area has about 3 task groups for land use management, global change impacts, which is looking at the indirect impact of climate on communities through behavior and climate adaptation and what those effects are having on biodiversity, community-based forest management, and then in the global health area, we're organized into population health and environment, or PHE, freshwater conservation, and WASH, water sanitation and hygiene, and how those can be integrated. And then the gender integration, which is kind of an underlying pillar of all of our work, but which we're really working to integrate into the global health areas. So I'm going to leave it at that. You can find out a lot more on our website, abcg.org, our social media presence. And please do join our listserv if you haven't. It's the best way to find out about events like these. And then we also send out publications via that newsletter. You can also always contact me. I'm here in Washington, D.C., and I have a colleague who's based in Nairobi. So with that, I want to remind everyone once again to please mute their microphone. We are hearing some folks. And I'm going to hand it over to Peyton West from the Frankfurt Zoological Society to introduce our speaker today.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Rebecca. Hi, guys. So let me just tell you quickly who we are, who the Frankfurt Zoological Society is, and then I will tell you about Rian, who's visiting from the Serengeti, along with Lauren and his wife. So Frankfurt Zoological Society is a German NGO. We're Germany's oldest conservation NGO. We aren't actually the Frankfurt Zoo, although the organization was established to support the zoo, but we split, and now we just do international conservation on the ground. We work in 18 countries around the world doing protected area management. We focus on specific areas, largely national parks, with high biodiversity. They're also large and mostly free from human impact. And we work in partnership with local authorities in various partnership models, ranging from a more technical advisory role all the way to co-management, where we have full decision-making responsibility over the area. So our model is to make a permanent commitment to an area. In Serengeti, we've been there for more than 50 years. It's our oldest project. And we have similar long-term projects around, mostly in Africa, but also in Southeast Asia, South America, and Europe. So Rian Labuschagne, which now I've learned how to pronounce, he manages FZS's Serengeti Conservation Program in Tanzania. He's headquartered along with Lorna in Serengeti National Park, and the project provides technical assistance to the park's management team, mainly in anti-poaching and in black rhino monitoring and protection. Before this, Rian worked for African Parks in Zakuma National Park in Chad, where he basically started the project there and was fully responsible for the management of the park for 6 years. Before that, he worked with Paul Tudor Jones, setting up the Grumeti reserves on the western boundary of Serengeti. And before that, he worked in Ngorongoro Crater for FZS back in the 90s. He's also worked in Luande, in Kalahari, and in Kruger. Rian has received 2 conservation awards, one from a civilian medal from President Deby of Chad for his achievements in Zakuma, and then in 2017, he won the Tusk Prince William Award for Conservation. So he's here today to talk about the rhinos in the Serengeti, which he's been working on and off since the 1990s.
Nice time there.
Yeah, that'd be like.
Good afternoon. We decided about the project in the Serengeti to talk about the black rhino. As Frankfurt, as you heard from Peyton, Frankfurt has been involved with the black rhino conservation in the Serengeti, East Africa, since the early 70s. Which one is
Right.
that one?
Yeah.
We look at, and we look at the map of the ecosystem, Ngorongoro, the Serengeti, has this got the we look at the map, the Serengeti National Park in the center, Loliondo game-controlled area, Ngorongoro. Then this map shows the distribution of black rhino in the early 70s. When they did an aerial count, they counted 420 rhino, aerial count and a ground count. At that time, the estimate was that Serengeti could carry 700 black rhino, Michaeli, subspecies Michaeli. 700 black rhino. In the 70s, they counted 420. The situation in the park at that time, border with Kenya was closed. There was no income in the park from tourism. A very demoralized ranger team, where salaries wasn't paid. The northern part of the park was basically closed, and the result was from the 70s to the early 90s, it went down to 3 known rhinos in the ecosystem in the south, and then Ngorongoro with 12 rhinos remaining. At this stage, we did not know what was happening in the Mara in the north, because it was basically the Tanzanian side was overrun by bandits. No tourism went in there, and very little was known of what happened with the rhino at that time. I'll just quickly go through the history of the rhino up to today. Early 90s, what happened is 2 females remained in the core area in the Serengeti, in the Moro area. An adult male walked out from Ngorongoro and met up with the 2 females, which was quite amazing, the distance they walked. If you know Ngorongoro area, it's an area where cattle, Maasai can still move in. It went through all these bomas and met up with the rhinos in Moru. Frankfurt also at that stage started a project in Ngorongoro to support the authorities there to protect the last 12 remaining rhinos in Ngorongoro. At that time, we put in place radio communication. We put new systems in place down in the crater, observation posts, a new monitoring program, training, just to upgrade around the remaining rhinos was there. There was huge concern that the rhinos, it was always said that the rhinos is walking out of the crater into the forest highlands, disappear. But we kept them, we knew exactly what rhinos were in the crater, and through observation posts, through a new monitoring system, through making sure there's teams on the grounds, we could start to make a proper monitoring program for the authorities there to see what's going on. In the 95 was the northern part, as I said, nobody went in there because of bandits, no tourism was in there, so we know very little what happened with the rhino movement from Maasai. There was definitely rhino movement from Masai Mara coming down. In October, November of that year, we did an intensive foot patrol and aerial survey in Moru area, hoping to find more rhinos, but we could only find the 2 females, the male that came out of Ngorongoro, and in that same year, the first calf from the 3, which was for us a very big moment that to show there's some progress again in the Serengeti. Frankfurt and Tanapa started a joint program then in Moru to protect that last group in there. Also, what happened in that same year in Ngorongoro was a female rhino, Amina, was poached down on the crater floor. It was a very big hit for us at that time, as there were only 4 producing females in the crater at the time. So we lost 25% of the breeding population in that one go. And also a calf, Richard, was left on its own. We captured that calf, put it in a boma. We took it to Arusha eventually and kept it there. And the rhinos were then 12 rhinos known in the crater. So very low population that it started out from. After 2 years that Richard was translocated to South Africa in exchange for 2 females that were introduced into the crater. It came from Addo, the original founder population from Kenya that went down to Addo National Park. At the time, it was before they were quite strict with subspecies, and they decided to take that population back to East Africa. And some went to Nkomazi, and we took 2 for Ngorongoro, 2 females. It's the same population that is still supplying recently that went to Akagera. It's now based in Tabatolo out of Addo. The Masai Mara population was given, these numbers I'm putting here was official numbers at the time. We're very careful with not giving any numbers out, and if we give numbers, it's numbers that the government will put in a presentation. We don't go into detail of what is still there and what not. I'll later on tell you what we think is the minimum of all these populations. But in the Mara, they reckoned between 30 to 40 rhinos that moved up and down from the Mara down in the Serengeti. The northern part at this in the late 90s was stabilized and open again, and the teams could go in there and start to look what is happening. That was a translocation of the 2 females up from South Africa that went into the crater, and the male Richard that went down, which is today an adult, one of the dominating bulls in that Tabatolo population, so it's continuing there. The 2 females that came up to Ngorongoro, one unfortunately died with an incident with a vehicle, but the other female continued, has got 7, 8 calves now, so contributed very well into the population of Ngorongoro. In Moru, we set up, although it was only 3 rhinos, we set up OP post, we set up VHF radio system. The Napa or Sinapa, the authority in Serengeti, the government authority, closed a lot of roads. They didn't allow people to come into Moru, which was a very strong reaction from the tourism side, although luckily they kept their foot down and said no more roads. They closed a lot of roads in Moru. Moru is a very open plains. If you see outside, they're very open plains. It's not really black rhino country. So a rhino can be seen for kilometers away. And if tourists see the rhinos, the bottlenecks or the barricades of cars, it's really disruptive. So the Napa was very strict in that they closed a lot of the roads in there. We then constructed, if I say we, Frankfurt, the project constructed the mycogenic monitoring post inside Moru. Although it was very few rhinos, we decided that is the core area, and if we want to grow the rhino population, we have to have faith and establish the post there for the future. We put in place daily rhino monitoring. In the beginning, it was very simple. With 4 rhinos, we very soon had 5, but it was very simple, the monitoring. They could go out every day. They knew exactly where the rhinos were, so it was a very easy operation with very little manpower. Then in 2010, from the same population of Tabatolo, 5 rhinos were introduced. It was an initiative from a Grumeti Fund, Paul Tudor Jones, who wanted to reintroduce originally at least 30 rhinos from Tabatolo in, but only 5 came in. One was poached, the other one, another rhino died, but out of the 3 surviving females, again, had very good results of good calving intervals, and some of those rhinos coming right down to Moro. So it contributed very much to the meta population, and just a lesson to learn from it is, again, what happened in Chad, in Zakuma, where 6 rhinos were introduced, 4 of them died, 2 are surviving, and they're learning what is happening, why it happened. It's still not clear answers, but it's definitely to do with the vegetation and the feeding, that they couldn't adapt quick enough. North Luangwa in Zambia, we had the same problems, introducing black rhino from Eastern Cape, where they used the succulents, and they couldn't adapt. They lost condition very quickly. It's very difficult to pick up in the field if they're losing condition or not, and we lost there some as well. But what remains, you learn a lot, and even if 1 and 2, what showed us with the 2 females, what remains of it is usually, or if you're lucky, a success, and it contributes big time. So you shouldn't be reluctant to do these operations, even if it doesn't go right. It's the only way we can really boost these big populations in a free roaming populations like this one in the Serengeti. Those are the those are the numbers for today. That is the minimum. So Moru, we say definitely a minimum of 30. There's more, but we're very careful not to get too much involved in it. Just a good example is the one right at the bottom, Macau. Sorry, that's a rhino we found early this year. It's a rhino that's ear notch, and that rhino was missing for 3 years. That came down into these hunting blocks of Mashwa and never picked up. It might have been that we picked the tracks up. But that rhino reappeared in Macau. There's a couple of rhinos like that is missing, that we don't know if they moved up or they came down. Ngorongoro is a minimum of 50 that was verified a year ago when they did a foot survey. So if you look at the whole rhino population in the Serengeti, the free roaming population in the Serengeti ecosystem is doing relatively well. Where we started with those 3 rhinos today, and rhinos moving up and down in the ecosystem. From Moru, we have individuals that's come down. It's to us very important, because that Moru population started with that 1 bull and the 2 females. So it was for us very important that we get new blood in from the other populations. These were the official growth rates that the Tanzania authorities has put out. It's 13% for Serengeti, 6% for Ngorongoro. We're definitely over the 100 mark for the total population, and Tanzanian authorities is very serious about the conservation of black rhino in the Serengeti ecosystem in Ngorongoro. There's still a problem of not enough interaction between the Mara and Ngorongoro and the Serengeti authorities, but we also looking at that and has a funding available to facilitate those meetings and try and encourage them more to speak to each other. Over the last 2 years, just to explain what the project, taking it from here and what we've been doing in the last 2 years, we had 2 operations where we captured all of what we call clean animals, animals that's not been marked, because in that case in Macau, it's very important that young animals we earmark, that we can monitor and know if they appear in Mara or they appear in Ngorongoro, know what happened to these rhinos. So we had a full operation earmarking. We also did VHF implants in the horn. And on the second operation, we started to use LoRa. I'll come back to that, a new monitoring system. We put in place a truck with equipment to capture and bring in, because these rhinos are now moving into wooded areas where snaring is becoming a problem. If one is found with a snare, the only way is to capture and bring into a boma and treat, otherwise you will lose that rhino. So we had to build up a capacity that we can capture and bring in and manage the population. One of the problems we found is that all these outlying rhinos that walk out, like the one in Macau, that we miss out on. The issue is that some of our, or most of the rangers has lost their ability to basically track rhinos. We rely on VHF, on vehicles, on OP posts. So we selected a young group and started to train them again how to track rhinos. Serengeti is not easy tracking country. It's not as easy as down in Kruger or in Zimbabwe. It's because of the cotton soil, the long grass, it's very difficult to track there, but at least to pick up feeding marks, to clearly be able to identify between rhino, elephant or hippo dung. We selected a team, and we're still busy with bringing in experts from outside and slowly building up the capacity again to be able to track rhino. They stay outside of the known populations and try and pick up if any rhino is moving out, to see if they can find where these straggler rhinos are settled outside. And then from there we can work out how they fit in, or how we incorporate that with the protection of the main population. We also trained a Tanzanian warden to fly a spotter plane that is fitted out to track a black rhino, the VHF collars. Also a presence in the air all the time where rhinos moving close to the boundaries, where they become into snaring areas and areas that is, where they can run into problems with local poachers. The plane is always in that area. It's used for elephant monitoring and other sources as well, but very often will pick up a warden or go and do rhino tracking. One of the issues in the past, in the 70s, why we lost that whole rhino population so quickly, is because no salaries and nobody paid any attention to the rangers at that time. Morale was very low. Many of the rangers that looked after or knew where rhinos was, that was why the rhino population dropped so quickly. They got involved in shooting rhino. The same what is happening in South Africa. You work with a low salary, low morale, and you protect something that's got huge value. So we, from Frankfurt side, from the beginning in the early 90s, we put a lot of effort in the ranger force to make sure morale is high, they've got all the equipment they need. We supply them with rations in the field on a weekly basis so that they don't need to go in to go and buy or go out of the areas to go and buy food. We make sure there's on the right-hand side, fabrication, busy with the mobile ranger post. We make sure they dry and they have all the equipment. We make sure they get their salaries, they get their field allowances, just to build up morale and to make sure that ranger force has got it, does not fall into that trap again of getting involved in all the wrong things. We continue to find donors that donate into the rhino conservation. For us, it's the rhino areas is spread out all through the ecosystem, all through the Serengeti National Park. So it is basically intensive protection zones that does not only benefit the black rhino there, it benefits everything in that area. So by making sure there's vehicles, there's radios, there's everything around the rhinos, it's protected the core areas inside the park, and buffalo numbers, elephant, right down to the dik-dik, everything benefits from it. But these are vehicles or equipment that from different donors that we channel to that project. We also have our own workshop in Serenara. It's the Chief Park Warden, that's his office. Just next to his office, we have a maintenance workshop where we maintain all the critical vehicles, all the critical equipment for Tanapa to make sure they don't have to, because government procurement is so, sometimes takes so long, and it is, they've got all the road graders, all the other equipment they've got to maintain. So we make sure all the conservation equipment is maintained there. Monitoring of the rhinos is always a challenge. We started with 3. Today there's over 60 rhinos we have to monitor, and the ranger force did not go up in proportion. We use VHF, which is not ideal. It's got to go into or we used to do it in horn implants. It only lasts about a year and a half. It's quite a big operation. If you now have to replace that the transmitter in that horn again, it grows up quite quickly. Next year you have to put another one in. It really disturbs the growing of the horn. It breaks off, and it's a big operation. We have to bring somebody in from outside to actually do it. So we started to work now on a LoRaWAN system, which is basically like a cell phone network you put up in a park with different towers that's linked with microwave link. And you can read in the op center where different sensors is in the eco. If you put it in a car or a rhino on a lion, whatever, you can monitor in the whole ecosystem and read in your op center the movement of those animals. We've also at the moment experimenting to go back to foot collars. Foot collars was we never continued to use it with the GPS transmitters because it was too heavy, and it caused a lot of sores and problems on that leg, and the same as with a snare, animal will very quickly die. But with the LoRa system, it's a very small sensor, very light. So we've gone back to a foot collar, testing that out. It's a satellite collar is about $2,000. A LoRa system is $100. If you do it, a couple of them, not just 1 or 2, but 20, 30, it brings it down to about $100 a sensor. So it also allows us to use it on the migration, to know what's happening to the migration, to vehicles, to patrols. But it's a monitoring system where we put in place, again, on the back of black rhino, but it will benefit everything else in the ecosystem. But we hope by having it successful on a foot collar, a year and a half with the battery life, it's very easy then to replace. We can use our local veterinarians to dart and replace the foot collar. So it's ongoing at this stage, but the results looks very well. That's in the op center, how we monitor foot collars that is on. We've got 3 rhinos with these collars on, and that is how it comes up on the interface in the ops room. We're also busy designing a new interface that will tell us, give us more information that we're looking for. For instance, we want to know all the tourism cars, the speed they're going, when they leave car roads, driving at night. So our interface we're developing now will write you a report when a car is speeding, when there's a heat map or too many cars around a Rhino area, we know we can go out and assist the problem. The ops room is set up in Serenera, where we have a trained Tanapa staff, where we operate the aircraft from, and where all information, not only on Rhino, but all information of the ecosystem come in on a daily basis. And we use that to help the wardens, to help the staff in the field to be able to put their rangers in the right place, the right time to protect specifically black rhino, but also where there's cattle coming in, where there's snaring. It's all done from the central ops center. We've also moved away from heavy land cruisers. In the wet season in the Serengeti on that cotton soil, basically you cannot go around with a Land Cruiser. Land Cruiser extremely expensive, very heavy vehicle. So we started to use a very, we can buy those Suzukis new in Tanzania for $10,000. You can buy for the same price of a Land Cruiser 4 or 5 of them, if you pay the government prices. It's a very light vehicle. We modify them with wide tires on, and with the Rhino monitoring, just 2 people on it. It enables us, with our limited budget, to have more vehicles in the field, less impact on the environment. And in a really heavy rainy season, it's the only vehicles that is really out there that can operate in those wet conditions. We've put a lot of effort into our VHF digital radio system that now covers the full park. Again, with the government limited budget they have and limited manpower, we took it on ourselves to maintain and to upgrade the system all the time. So it's a partnership where we work very close with Tanapa to make sure they have that communication, because without that, our ops room, all the operations around the rhinos cannot really function. But this is for tourism, for all the other operations in the park, the VHF system. We recently got involved in Ngorongoro again. There was about 5 years that Frankfurt pulled out of Ngorongoro, and they asked us to get involved again. And we've just, in this year, started up again with helping them. The same problems that basically came up in the Serengeti with vehicles, maintenance of vehicles. So we've set up a workshop. This is the first vehicle that was basically a scrap heap that we brought into our workshops and employed those 2 mechanics that's now full-time in Ngorongoro, and we overhauled the whole vehicle, and it's now down in a crater again with anti-poaching and monitoring, and we're busy with a second vehicle. So we're just getting involved in getting the equipment up to date. They also purchased the Suzuki and fitted it out as a mobile workshop that is now full-time down on a crater, making sure all the equipment is functioning. In the same way, we're slowly getting involved in monitoring, introducing new techniques, introducing the LoRa system there as well, and just as we go along, help to get the whole system up to date. The same problem there is over 50 rhinos now, no increase in vehicles or rangers really, and these rhinos are dispersing. It's much more difficult to monitor and to protect. Challenges we see is still poaching is still a very big issue for us. Not so much local communities around the park, but individuals coming in from Dar es Salaam, from Rwanda. We've had individuals specifically coming in looking for black rhino. Tanapa has got a very good intelligence unit that works outside the park. And most of our warnings or most of our ability to stop rhino poachers come in has been the intelligence unit feeding information back to the ops room, and then the teams there being deployed or the aircraft deployed to deter or to stop it on the boundaries. Cable snares is still a very big problem. In the park, we lose 100 to 120,000 animals per year, mostly wildebeest. The areas, Moru, the main area, not so much because it's open country, it's not really snaring country. But in the north of the park and where the rhinos are dispersing into Mashwa Game Reserve, they're going more and more into areas that we still find a lot of snares. Frankfurt, together with TANAPA, has put in a new initiative where we get funding from the stakeholders, hotels, to put teams in the field specifically just to remove snares. This is one of the camps they've been taking out. We employ ex-poachers from our community program where they identify ex-poachers, which is out of, or they say they're out of that game. And TANAPA gives us 2 rangers, which carries the authority to arrest. We give them a vehicle and they operate out of the ops center, and all the information we gather from where the migration is, aerial patrols, we feed into their movements. In the last year and a half since they've been operating is close to 20,000 snares that they have removed, and they continuously, month after month, as we get funding in from the private sector, these 2 teams are removing snares. We hope to increase it. We've got similar teams to counter the cattle invasions, where we use motorbikes, the aircraft, radio communication, where the plane spot where they bring cattle in. We bring the motorbikes in, they arrest them and bring the cattle in. They have to pay fines. It's been very successful, especially in the areas where we know the rhino is going to move into eventually, to clean it out at the early stage. Predation by lion and hyenas is becoming, especially in the crater, big problem. That was late last year, when lions attacked an adult female rhino in a crater, and the calf, a 9-month-old calf, was separated. Later on went for the calf. The tourist cars interfered and kept the lions off. It was captured, but the rhino, unfortunately, died 2 weeks after the capture. But it happens in Moru and in Ngorongoro more and more, with lion and hyena taking young calves. So it's taking its toll on the growth rate. Just to show you the pressure on the ecosystem, where you see that dam just above, that's the core rhino area. This is a hunting block, a Mashwa hunting block, a game reserve, where the rhinos are starting to move in. You see there where the rhinos are moving down, and that's the park boundary. So you can, even if you from far out, you can see the hard edge agriculture and the human population right up to that boundary. A lot of snaring coming in there, and a rhino population moving out of the Moru area into that more wooded area, but also an area under pressure from communities. One of the main reasons we believe is tourism, just a number of cars that block them when they want to move, that with radio and phone, and a lot of these cars has actually got internet in the cars. As soon as they see a rhino, call all the other guys, and very quickly you've got 30 cars, 40 cars there. The same with lion, same with actually any other species. And it's a very, very big problem that we're now starting to work with TANAPA on. It's a complete different project, but also out of the ops room, we'll use that LoRa system to try and help them to manage their whole tourism or the vehicle movements in the park, to try and and reduce the problem in the key areas for black rhino. That is basically our rhino project and where we stand. We're not only with black rhino, as I said, we also on the tourism, we also with the elephant population monitoring and in the same time see what is happening there. We also have a sister project, a community project, which is completely just work with the communities on the outside, which we work close with them in that all the people we employ, for instance, for the desnaring, comes out of that community project. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. We have about 15 minutes for questions. I want to first open it up to folks in the room and then those online. And if you can just introduce yourself, let us know where you're coming from. First, that'd be great. Yep.
Hi, Rian. I don't know if you remember us from Gurmeti with the trail guards.
Yeah.
I studied rhinos in Nepal, and we found that tigers would kill rhino calves up to about a year. Once they got bigger than a year, they were strong enough to hold their own. Do you find calves larger than a year still being threatened by lions and hyenas?
Yeah, well, in that case, it was an adult lion, adult rhino.
Oh, wow.
We had that calf in a crater in the 90s, was 9 months old. We left that calf out for about a week. We followed the calf, and almost every night hyenas tried to take the calf. We had lions on that calf. That was eventually we decided to take the calf out. They will definitely, I don't know up to what, a year and a half or 2 years. There's so many lions, you know, in Ngorongoro now, if an animal goes down or there's, you know, some activity, you have 40, 50 hyenas in half a minute, you know, on there. So a rhino has no chance, a young rhino has no chance. And definitely the rangers in Moru has witnessed a couple of times lions going for, you know, young but adult rhino.
Yeah.
So
And the pride in Moru is about 14 lions. So if they do actually get onto a rhino and they can, I think they will actually be able to kill an adult as well.
Social hunters like that, as opposed to a solitary tiger, it's too much, yes, probably the difference. Can I ask quickly too, are you looking at experimenting at all with ways of attaching, since the LoRa transmitter is so small, like a transmitter, an antenna, and maybe a small battery, we're trying to do it remotely rather than have to knock the animal down, like possibly a drone that can get close to one and project a device on it.
Not yet. I know they have that very small. There is a system they developed that they can put on birds and stuff.
Oh yeah, there's small
Yeah.
batteries.
There's not yet, nothing under the skin for rhinos that I know of that anyone could, you know, that has been even in the testing phase. There's the other big fox or a system that rather two of them are testing, and Hugo and them testing in Zimbabwe, but it's similar to this LoRa system.
Yeah.
The reason why, you know, the LoRa system, we need a traffic control or a traffic monitoring system. That's why we're trying to do both with them. The original LoRa system we put in had worked on triangulation, the same as the one in Akagera National Park. But we found we're going to need too many towers, and we wanted one that you'd use the sensor, the GPS, and then depends on the size battery. And so far, it looks good. The foot collar is still an issue to find a strong enough foot collar, because if they go up those mountains, the wear and tear on those foot collars is very hard. So we're testing to see what, working with Martin Haupt in South Africa, that's developing collars. And he's also put up his own LoRa system in South Africa. So we work very close with him to find solutions. On the other animals, we're happy, but on rhino, it is still to find the right material to make a foot collar that's just like a bangle, that's not going to cause any long-term problems. And then the main thing that if we change that, we can do it in 10 minutes, just change the collar and it goes on again. But I'm sure there's going to be things that are going to come up, other technologies and ideas that's going to come up eventually. But for us at this stage, it's also security-wise, it's a much safer system like the VHF. We know of people in Moru that had the frequencies and just put it on their car radios and drive and can pick up when there's a rhino in the early days where there's a rhino in the vicinity. So it's something we would like to improve and get out of the VHF system and the warm implant.
I have a comment, specific question. My name is Suzanne Murray. I run our Smithsonian's Global Health Program, and I'm here with Dawn Zimmerman, who's our Africa regional veterinarian. We work a lot more in Kenya than we do in Tanzania. We work with Kenya Wildlife on a lot of rhino issues, both diagnostic as well as tracking modalities. Upcoming in October, we are together putting on a course in advanced rhino medicine, everything from safe anesthetic techniques, monitoring, diagnostics, and therapeutics, and whatnot. If there's folks in your group in Tanzania that you feel would benefit from participating in that course, we'd love to hear about it. Maybe we can make that available. We don't have the money to fly any more people in, but they're welcome to participate. So maybe at the end we can connect.
Yeah, if you stay in touch with Peyton, we would. It's sometimes difficult getting the Tanzanian the NAPA members to go to Kenya. At the moment, it's difficult to travel outside the country. But if it's in advance, we can do the applications and would definitely be interested.
Great. And we've worked with TANAPA before on some giraffe issues, so I think they see us as sort of a neutral group, and I think so if we can facilitate, it'd be wonderful.
If you can say what level, is it the warden or is it on the ranger level, a sergeant level?
It's a higher level, so it's veterinarians. So it's people who will be responsible for actually making diagnoses and technicians and everything from how to, blood banking and pathology. So if a rhino dies, being able to get a necropsy in a timely manner, but get the tissues read out and have a response time as well. What we've seen a lot in some areas is, a rhino will die and people do their best to say, oh, we think it died of this or that. But sometimes they die, as all mammals and all animals do, they die from something that's treatable or preventable. And similarly, we've had a situation with, baby rhinos, baby elephants that are orphaned or abandoned. So we're also working with that group to provide more information on nutritional management, neonatal management, captive care, just to keep everybody healthy while they're young and then fit to be hopefully reintroduced.
Hi, I'm Carter Smith with African. I had a question about what the conversation sort of sounds like or looks like with when you're training the rangers to do the foot patrols and go out and really know how to track these rhinos again. What that conversation looks like to incentivize them so that they are doing that and don't have the incentive to work with a poacher who's going to give them top dollar for a rhino horn. The reason I'm asking is because you touched on in the beginning where TANAPA was trying to discourage tourism because, of course, there's such an impact on the rhinos and the park. But that very relationship between tourist dollars and bringing tourists in to raise the exposure and the tourist dollars. So I'm just wondering sort of what that incentive, is there an incentive conversation of, other than to conserve? Is there sort of monetary? Is there like, how is that approached?
But I think that's why, it's very, if we can use technology to monitor more,
Yeah.
and we have an accurate way of monitoring, the less people know about the movement, the exact core areas and so on, the better. But the Rhino team, about 120 rangers, is very well selected, or as well as we could, or the Tanapa could. And they all basically, they've got very good knowledge. Some of those rangers there we worked with in the early 90s, they're still there. They're close to retirement now, but you've seen it from 3 rhinos to 50. So they know exactly where this calf went and settled in there and he formed up. They can tell you the whole history. So there's a lot of knowledge with the teams on the ground. The tracking team, not so much because they work on the outside, but if they pick up and know where a rhino has settled or has moved outside of the core areas, usually then we will bring the main monitoring team and they will incorporate that area in their monitoring program. Or if it's a rhino that we really like, this one in Macau, we would really try and get a transmitter or at this stage, for those outliers, we use still the old VHF, but we will make a plan to upgrade the monitoring around and the protection around that rhino. But the knowledge is in Moru. You have tented camps in the hills around Moru where they on a daily basis knows everything, where rhino is going out, coming in. They know the movement of the rangers, so it's very difficult you have to plan to know the threat is always there. Everybody knows where the rhinos are.
Yeah.
So you have to plan around there. The main thing we're trying to do is the rotation of rangers. That rangers don't stay too long in a specific area, that you rotate all the time. And to make the turnaround time shorter, that you don't have for 6 weeks a ranger in the field where they lose morale and they can then start to plan what they want to do. But to make it so that I believe it's the same time in, the same time out. If he's 10 days in, he should be 10 days out to rest. I mean, that way you can really have the rangers that they're mobile in the field, working right through the night, but he has enough time off. And if he comes in again, they go into another area. They can never plan where they go into. That's possibly one of the best ways to avoid that they can plan or with a friend do something on if they have inside knowledge of where the rhinos go. But all the rangers there knows exactly where all the rhinos are. And it's to us more a problem that the tourism side, the guides and the people in the camp has very accurate information of rhino movement. And that with cell phones and everything, it's very simple to send that out.
And is it okay if I ask one more quick question? It kind of comes to both of you. I've understood that there's often stress and trouble with relocation of rhino, and you address some of that, the sort of acclimation, the 2-week acclimation, and that can be a very big stress for the rhinos. I was also under the impression that they didn't take well to the actual being anesthetized, that actual process can be a stressor and trouble more than other species. Is that an accurate notion?
So I'd say yes and no. I think that there's some teams that are extremely well. So if anesthesia, if practiced properly, it actually goes very, very well.
Okay.
And there's certain things like, you don't chase an animal for an hour. You don't get hot. You do it early in the morning. That said, there's always ways of making things better, which is one of the things that we're working on. There's technologies that we have in the U.S. that they don't necessarily have in Kenya. But for instance, just ways of getting a blood sample immediately and testing the acid-base status, which is, so you anesthetize a rhino, you get a a
Yep,
sample.
I did this with other species, so that's what.
Right, and
So
that's
that's what.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we're working on introducing in this thing. We wrote a grant to buy some of this equipment, these iStat things, so you can look at it right then and say, actually, this rhino's doing great. Let's load and ship. We're great.
Yeah.
Or we chase this one. It's really hot and it's getting a little bit too acidotic. Let's wake it up and let it go. So so those are some of the things that we're working on, and also the parameters of how long should you keep an animal down. So I think the majority of people that we've worked with in South Africa, Tanzania, are really great at get the animal down real quickly and get it up. But I think using some of the newer technologies of applying some of the newer data, like how hot can an animal get, how many people should be around it, what are the reasonable parameters.
Stresses, yeah.
So I can also
you agree?
I don't know you guys, but actually I'm Eric Dinnerstein, so I worked years ago, Chris Wimmer and Mitch Bush.
Oh, yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so we studied greater one-horned rhinos in Nepal with the Smithsonian for years.
Okay.
We've knocked down 150 rhinos, well, much more now since then, but for a period, moved 86 of them, never lost a single rhino. Probably have done everything wrong you can do, and still, wrong time of day because you're chasing them.
Right. Yeah.
They get hot. Ederphine hydrochloride has worked so well, and having the reversal agent right there gets them back on their feet in 30 seconds. But certain guidelines, like trying to keep it down less than 20 minutes, seems to work really well. But it also depends on the species. So, with other rhinos, Sumatrans, nobody's handled the job, and it's more challenging, and white rhinos too. But
I think it's probably been a case where it's so much of it is the relocation and the transferring and the sort of the stress on the animal after. So that's why it was.
Definitely that. I think the drugs work pretty well, and the reversal agent. I just wondering too on the animals you're using, that you'd think that black rhinos, like the ones in Damaraland that are living on really toxic euphorbias that burn your skin when you put it on the sap on, how they can digest that if in their genetics are such that they're able to handle a wide range of food, even some of the most toxic. So I wonder, I'm sort of surprised that they wouldn't adapt, being kind of eating from a wide variety of browse, that's the problem rather than maybe something else like a disease. But if they're losing condition really fast.
I think with the ones in Zakuma, definitely, because we were very much involved in the initial surveys to see if there's enough food. Everybody came up that knew a bit about black rhino and the vegetation. What it seems is, and as I say, the same happened in North Luangwa, where we lost, it's a couple of rhinos that died there. I don't know, maybe Peyton, it's 4 or 5, I think, that died.
Might have been 5. I always heard that was because they were over.
It was condition that was left, but one of the reasons was that they didn't adapt quick enough out of the Eastern Cape, where they eat basically the same thing, that toxic,
croton,
all those succulents.
Yeah.
But they didn't adapt quick enough to it, and it is difficult to judge a condition of a black rhino out there. You have to be very careful what you look at. And all the people, Pete Morkel, the vet that was involved there, that we've spoken to on the Zakuma ones, it seems there was enough food, they were feeding, but they just didn't adapt quick enough to what was available there. One must also remember it was a minor that went up. The rhinos, Longaipis there is all extinct. So we decided to take a minor up from. They came from Malelangwe, no, came from northern Transvaal somewhere, but it was Marakele. It was specifically not from Eastern Cape because they were worried about that whole feeding thing. And it will be interesting to see the 2 remaining ones over the next year, because they're now making very sure and feeding, and I think everybody is watching very carefully. But to see what has happened there, if it was just that they had to to do it much slower, introduce them take a longer time in the smaller bomas and the bigger one, but keep them longer under observation and feeding. But they are tricky. I mean, usually it goes very simple. All the ones that we took in the early 90s, we took Rhino to Malawi, and also there was huge concern about in Luanda at that time, the vegetation. They did very well. They'd never had a problem. The ones we brought into Serengeti and Ngorongoro adapted very well. There was never any problem with feeding. But it is something that I think now much more with any reintroduction. We hope to do bring another 6 into the Serengeti this year from Tabatolo. But again, there is not so much a risk, we hope, but I think everybody is much more aware of it, to be very aware of if you release, if that animal lose condition, to bring him straight back into the boma.
I want to see if there are any burning questions from folks online. I think we have time for one question. Didn't see anything come up in the chat box. Okay, if not, then I think we'll close for today. Thank you again.